Once a month, Paula Pant, host of the Afford Anything podcast, answers voicemail questions the listeners send in. Here's one now.
Hey Paula, my name is Edward. Love the podcast. I have a quick question for you, one that I think can be great for a lot of other listeners. My question is, how can I learn from other people around me, learn financial experiences, learn about them and be able to apply them into my life? I'm 28. Just now, my wife and I have got quite a bit of money that we're excited to invest. And we've got people around us that have had a lot of experience financially with some successes and with some losses. And my question is, how can I learn from these people? What questions can I ask? Oftentimes, I'll get tidbits from a successful father-in-law who's an orthopedic surgeon. He'll say things like, oh, I've lost a lot of money here, or I did great on this. But then when you ask follow-up questions, people usually shy and become a little more private. I have another uncle that did great selling a business, making millions of dollars. Same type of thing. So again, my question is, how can we ask questions? How can we dig into things a little bit more with people around us and allow them to share their experiences and help us to learn so that we can make better financial decisions? Hopefully that question makes sense and you can get to it on the podcast. Thanks again for the podcast. We love it.
This is a great question. Okay, so you have access to people whose judgment you trust and whose experiences you believe you can learn from, but you're not sure how to get them to open up. Here are a couple of tips. Number one, when you're asking them a question, ask about their thinking process prior to going into a decision. Most people don't ask questions like that. Instead, they ask these incredibly detailed, narrow questions in which the answer that I would give is not pertinent to them. For example, people ask me all the time, are your properties in an LLC? Well, who cares what mine are in? What the person wants to know is, should that person's properties be in an LLC? And more broadly, what they really want to know is, how can I best protect my existing assets? That's what they're really asking. But instead of asking the question, the broad question of, hey, what are your thoughts on strategies for asset protection? Instead of asking that at the broad level, instead they want to know like a very specific detail about my own business. And yeah, I mean, for me, that's not uncomfortable because I blog and podcast about this continuously for years. But to the average person who isn't so public about what they do, I can totally understand why that would be uncomfortable because it's a super detailed, specific question about their business. And frankly, it's irrelevant to what you're actually trying to figure out because you're trying to figure out how to protect your own assets. Another example, if a person asks, hey, Paula, can you tell me exactly what allocation of stocks versus bonds you hold and how much of your money is in the market as compared to real estate? Like, what are the proportions there? Again, I blog and podcast about this all day long. So by virtue of being a niche public figure, I expect to get questions like that. But to the average person, that question is A, incredibly personal, and B, completely unnecessary because the intent behind the question, really what you're trying to figure out is, how do I make a decision about what type of risk exposure I should have within my own portfolio? How should I make decisions about equities versus bonds? How should I make decisions about the overall broad market versus real estate versus other types of investments such as commodities or buying small businesses? That's what you're really trying to figure out. You're trying to figure out how this knowledge applies to you. And so if that's what you want to learn, ask that because it's A, less invasive, less intrusive, and B, it's the most direct way to phrase the question that you're actually asking. So that's tip number one. Ask questions at the 30,000 foot high level, at the broad level that apply to your own life rather than asking nitpicky questions about the other person's lives, the other party's life. And by the way, if you need a framework for thinking about this, one exercise that I sometimes go through is just to keep asking why. So again, going back to that LLC example, if the first question that pops into your head is, hey, I want to know if you put your properties in an LLC, then pause and ask yourself, why are you asking that? Okay, well, I'm asking it because I want to know whether or not I should put mine in an LLC. Okay, and why are you asking that? Well, I'm asking that because I'm concerned about the risk of a lawsuit and I want to know how to protect myself. Okay, all right, now we're getting somewhere. So by continually asking the why behind, asking yourself the why behind a question that pops into your mind, That's how you'll be able to work backwards and get yourself to that broad, high level, here's what I'm really asking. And once you're at that broad level, you'll be able to frame it in a non-intrusive way. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to just volunteer a few details about your own life. If you want to encourage somebody to open up and share, lead by example. So if you're the first person to throw a few numbers out there and say, hey, we have X amount of dollars in a savings account right now, I'm not really sure what to do with it. You just put that information about yourself out there and then maybe ask a broad open-ended question like, do you have any thoughts? So that they know that they can give you solicited opinions and solicited advice, because a lot of people don't like to give unsolicited advice. State your situation. Make it clear that you are soliciting feedback, and then go quiet and let them volunteer what they will. And then tip number 3 is to find out who their mentors and influencers are. You could simply ask, hey, who are some of your favorite authors within the world of business and money? Like, who do you like to read? Who do you like to listen to? How did you learn what you know? Ask them who their mentors are, who their coaches and authors and, mentor sounds very formal, but ask them for the names of the people who have influenced them. And that'll actually have 2 benefits. Number 1, you'll have those names directly. And number 2, you can then ask the follow-up question, oh, what did you like about them? Or what did you learn from them? And that's a great opener as well to get somebody to spontaneously share a story or an anecdote that could be very illustrative. So Edward, I hope that helps, and thank you so much for asking that question. Good luck.
Hey, did you enjoy this excerpt from the Afford Anything podcast? Then be sure to subscribe to Paula's YouTube channel. Not only is every podcast episode and Ask Paula question released here on YouTube, other creative deep thought videos are created just for you. Remember, you can watch anything, just not everything. Fill your YouTube viewing time with more videos to make you think and grow so you can afford anything. Go ahead, hit that little red subscribe button. We'll take care of the rest.